Welcome back. We're monitoring the situation in Lower Manhattan, where 8 people died earlier today after a man deliberately drove a rental truck down a crowded bike path in an act of pure terrorism. Future historians will no doubt write about radical Islamic terrorism as a major issue of our time, and I hope we will leave lessons on how to defeat jihad for the future. But maybe we won't, considering how history has been treated recently in America. Last night, when I sat down with White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, we discussed the recent efforts, primarily from the left, to tear down and wipe away monuments and relics of some of the most important leaders in American history. Here's what General Kelly had to say.
I think it's just very, very dangerous, and it shows you what, how much of a lack of appreciation of history and what history is. I would tell you that Robert E. Lee was an honorable man. He was a man that gave up his country to fight for his state, which in 150 years ago was more important than country. It was always loyalty to state first back in those days. Now it's different today. But the lack of an ability to compromise led to the Civil War. And men and women of good faith on both sides made their stand.
Of course, the very suggestion that our history be appreciated, warts and all, led to what has become a common media practice in these times: mass hysteria.
This was not a close call. America mattered then, and it matters now. History is not history when it comes to the Civil War. These monuments were put up during Reconstruction to stick it to freed black people and to let them know that there would be a new Jim Crow.
The language Kelly used is straight out of sort of mid-20th century textbooks. You know, it's the myth of the lost cause, where the Confederacy is noble leaders like Robert E. Lee being motivated not over slavery but over love of state first.
If Mr. Gregory and Mr. Avalon cared to do the smallest bit of research, they would quickly discover that even folks like renowned Civil War historian Shelby Foote and, you know, that rabid alt-writer expressed Kelly's very sentiment. Joining us now for reaction, 2 historians, Craig Shirley, a presidential historian and Ronald Reagan biographer, the author of the new book, Citizen Newt, and Jane Hampton Cook, the author of 9 books about U.S. presidents and American history. Great to see both of you. Jane, let's start with you. He got hammered, Kelly, for the comments he made yesterday about Robert E. Lee.
He did. And I was reading the criticism, and I thought, this is really exaggerated. I mean, maybe General Kelly's thoughts were incomplete. He could have mentioned slavery. He could have explained more about that.
I think we don't know about slavery. I mean, is that something we don't know about at this point?
Right, but he's not a historian, and I think he's got such a mellow, calm tone to him. You listening to him talk, I just didn't get the sense that he was being disrespectful or out of sync with history.
Craig, John F. Kennedy talked about the gallant failure of Robert E. Lee, right, and how he moved forward toward Reconstruction with the bravery of his troops. Right. FDR, right, one of the finest Christian gentlemen, one of the finest soldiers America had ever seen. FDR and John F. Kennedy.
John Cash wrote a song, Thank You, Robert E. Lee, because Lee laid down his arms at Appomattox. And why Lee is indeed great is because of what he did after the Civil War. Because Jefferson Davis, the president of the South, wanted to break up the Confederate Army, form militias and guerrilla units, and keep the war going. And they would have, too. Those Southern boys were born with guns coming out of the womb, is that they could live off the land for many, many years, and they could keep the war going for a number of years. Lee broke with Jefferson Davis and said, no, we must rejoin the Union, lay down your arms, go back to your farms.
And you think, Jane, of the American story. We hope it's an unending story. It just goes on and on and on. Like in all of our lives, we have failures, we have triumphs, we have successes, we have virtues and sins. And yet, we want to look at each monument or relic through the eyes of the politically correct idea of the time. And obviously, everyone knows that slavery is evil. But the idea that because someone happened to be born in the South, and how many people, maybe 2 of you historians know, how many Southerners didn't side with the South? Not many, right?
No,
not many, at least during the war.
Most of them were not slave owners.
Right, most of them were not slave owners. Right. But isn't it important now that we have a historical understanding that we can gravitate toward? We don't have to agree on everything, but there are certain things like the anthem and our founding that we can say, God, these were truly great men. They had great sacrificial concern for the future of the country.
Well, and it's looking at individuals with optimism and hope and seeing the good. I mean, I write books about history because of patriotism, to inspire the good and the hopeful in our country. King George III, after the Revolutionary War, our enemy during the Revolution, said he believed that Republican governments were dependent on an ardent love of country. He even recognized that patriotism was a key to a Republican government continuing. And he was our enemy during the Revolutionary War.
Tocqueville,
Yes.
Lafayette. I mean, they
That's
came
right.
to this place, this new place, and they thought, there's something incredible going on here.
Incredibly
So special.
Yes.
They almost loved the country more than the people who were just being born
That's
in the
right.
country
Yes,
at the
that's
time.
right.
And
Yeah.
Craig, we have these terrorist attacks, mass migration of people into the United States from countries that are very different. Doesn't mean
Right.
they can't come here and be successful.
Right.
But boy, when we don't even teach our own citizens the goodness that is America, what are we going to do? What does this mean for the people coming in from totally different cultures?
Well, obviously, we're worried about the future. If we're not teaching the past, how can we expect to teach the present into the future? Is that who the enemy is, why he's here, why he shouldn't be here, what is going on in this country, what is the battle at stake? Is that if we don't understand the meaning of the American Revolution, how 100 years from now are we going to expect students to understand the meaning of the war on terror?
And Craig, remember Reagan's farewell address? Because
Sure.
Craig knows every speech.
Yes.
Reagan's farewell address spoke
there
about the teaching of history
about
to our
how
young
important
people.
it was. That's right, exactly.
We've got to know, why we flew those missions. What we did on D-Day. We
Yes.
have to know the story of America, and if we don't, we won't know what it's like to try to how important it is to save America. What's worth saving?
You mentioned John Kennedy. Nobody quoted the framers and founders more than Ronald Reagan
What's
and
happened to
John
those
Kennedy.
Democrats? What's happened to those Democrats? Where are those Democrats today? Not many.
No, they're not there. I mean, John Kennedy was a different kind of Democrat. He was.
Yeah, he was like a Republican.
He was. A historian at the time called him an enlightened cold warrior. He was essentially a Republican. Look how many times he used the word freedom in his inaugural address.
Freedom, liberty, the
Yes,
founders.
that's right.
All good stuff. Jane and Craig, great to see you both. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.